the self-styled Iron Lady of Kenyan politics, a nickname she earned when she swung her handbag at a sitting president at a time few could lift a finger at even a village headman. In her typical own terms, Martha Wangari Karua ended her suspense game and completed a reunion of Second Liberation comrades who happened to share a common story from 1992 to 2022. Martha Karua turned blue. So just what will her presence in Azimio la Umoja mean to everyone else in there? Then President Uhuru Kenyatta's Kura Moja may not be just one vote after all, and some political quarters seem to now find that one man, one vote democratic mantra grossly misleading. So a change of tune is ongoing, with Deputy President William Ruto now asking his one vote boss to leave the campaign stump. The memo will, however, stamp for leadership and integrity with an X-rated letter from a 1960s vice president. The kicker poses a question from the late First Lady Lucy Kibaki and advises Mama Ngina Kenyatta, to buckle up and might take just wants the IEBC to man up. This is News Gang, tonight hosting a wolf. I'll tell you why.
I'm here to confirm that from now onwards, NARC Kenya and I are supporting the Azimio presidential candidate, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Wilson Mushora is our sign language interpreter tonight. Francis Gashuri is away, but we've got Tom Wolf, who's a research analyst, joining the Gangsters panel tonight. Tom, karibu sana, welcome. And we see the Kiswahili side is on one end, because Tom happens to speak some
We can do this
Kiswahili.
whole show in Swahili.
They can do the whole show in Kiswahili if they like, and the rest of us on this end. Thank you. Welcome to the program. And the hashtag is NewsGang. So, I mean, let's start off by talking about that. So that was a big development, although some might say, Linus, perhaps not altogether surprising.
Not altogether surprising indeed, but the one thing that really came through is Martha Karua held her decision to the very last possible minute. If there is one thing she succeeded to do all this time, it is to keep the suspense going. And she did it in many different ways. First, by the number of political formations that she engaged. You remember she had an arrangement with the Mount Kenya Forum, Leadership Forum, with the Chama cha Kazi of Moses Kuria. There was also the Service Party of Mwangi Kiunjuri. And they had their meetings, and media was there covering all this. And then before long, there was One Kenya Alliance. And then after One Kenya Alliance, there was silence. Actually, I should mention there was a rumor first that she is the surprise guest at the UDA conference in Kasarani, and she denied that, and she actually stayed home. And the other surprise, of course, that should be mentioned is she kept off the Azimio NDC and the Jacaranda rally. And I think in the social media she just posted and said, relaxing at home.
Right.
Typical Martha. Surprises, and she held it to the last minute and came out. And look at the terms which she came out with. She referred to Raila Odinga not as Baba, but comrade. Comrade. We were there with you in 1992. We were there with you in the Second Liberation and the passage of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Meaning, again, introducing another kind of relationship between herself and Raila Odinga. There is an insinuation of equals there, right?
Yeah, I'd like us to actually just listen to that soundbite that you are alluding to, where she's saying she's been in the trenches with Raila Odinga.
Been able, without much struggle, to identify a critical mass of good people within the Azimio coalition. And that is needed to steer the nation in the right direction. I have been in the trenches with the Azimio presidential flag bearer, Comrade Raila Amolo Odinga. At this stage, because that is a struggle language, I will not use Baba, I will say comrade. We've been in the trenches together.
So she says she's been able to find a critical mass of good people, but, you know, she was on the record as saying there were sort of bad people or thieves everywhere.
Thieves on both sides.
So it would seem like she picked the lesser of two evils, Jamila?
She actually said that she relates more with what Azimio and Raila Odinga stands in terms of what they have planned for the future of this country going forward after the elections. And as she spoke, Lina spoke about how after OKA she was quiet, she did not attend the NDC for UDA, she did not attend the Azimio one, and there was speculation about where she was going. And then now her supporting Raila Odinga and his bid for the presidency now brings in the issue of whether she's being considered as a running mate to him. Because I think both sides have indicated the intention, or to some extent, of having a running mate from central Kenya. Because of all those equations, you look at the fact that there is no candidate from that region, the fact that having a running mate from that region would probably maybe increase the chances of having support from the region. We cannot not talk about the votes that would come from central Kenya. If they'll all go in one basket or another, I think a factor of running mate is a big deal. And what does this mean now for those within Azimio who are eyeing the running mate seat from probably Kalonzo Musyoka or Peter Kenneth or Laikipia governor who would be a running mate contender if he's being considered from the region? And also, what does this mean for the other side, the Kenya Kwanza side? Yeah. Does it now give them a bit more pressure to really consider having a running mate from central Kenya? Because, of course, we've not said that Martha Karua is, but that is an issue. I think that's in everyone's mind of an Odinga Karua ticket.
Yeah, and I know we'll come back and talk about the running mate issue and why that term, you know, comes up in reference to Martha Karua in a moment, and I know that's why I want to bring in Tom Wolf in a moment. But before we get there, I just wanted to, you know, step back a little bit. So, you know, there was something called the One Kenya Alliance, you know, before the events that we saw a little earlier. And in fact, Martha Karua, when she was speaking to our Martin Munene in Nyeri just earlier this week, actually had to pronounce the death of One Kenya Alliance before then, you know, what we saw. But like we have seen and said, these two share a common history. They were, I think, joined politics at just about the same time, have been, you know, MPs for just about the same time, actually left elective politics at exactly the same time. But they had a very sharp, you know, differing of ways in 2007. So who is the Martha then? Who is the Martha now? You know, what more does she bring to the table besides, you know, the big talk about possible running mate? Linus?
There are no permanent enemies in politics. They say that, and there are only permanent interests. And you can see politicians from unlikely backgrounds working together just because there is something to be achieved in terms of immediate interest, immediate political interest, or even personal interest. Martha Karua of 2007 and the Martha Karua of 2022, those are how many years? About 15 years. They've both walked separate ways, by the way, across that time, because in 2013, Raila Odinga and Martha Karua were actually opponents in the presidential race. They each ran their own race unsuccessfully. But why are they together? I think it came down to what are the options? Because this is one race that shaped itself so early into a two-horse race. I know there are a lot of people who don't, especially other candidates who don't like hearing anybody saying that this is a two-horse race. But unfortunately, or just as dictated by the nature of our politics, it shaped itself quite early into Raila-Ruto race. And you can see all attempts to have the so-called third force have not really worked. One Kenya was supposed to be a third way. And I say this, pun intended, there is actually a third way alliance as well.
Right.
And that has not worked because things already shaped themselves into this two-horse race. And if you look at the factors behind that, one of the main factors was actually the fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta threw his weight behind Raila Odinga, and it became quite a big factor, as we will discuss at some point.
And, you know, back to the issue of running mate, right? So it's interesting that every time Martha Karua is mentioned, the next phrase that follows is running mate. And we've heard of possible talk of this both, you know, in the Kenya Kwanza and, of course, in Azimio. And that's an interesting prospect, Tom, is it not? You know, the whole running mate conversation. A big one that then does shape, you know, perceptions. Tom?
It's true. Of course, as a researcher, whenever we have such I can say dramatic, or at least media and public grabbing events as such an announcement by Honorable Karua, I would like someone to give us money so we could go into a survey. And you raised the issue of running mates. I mean, we know that in any presidential system, there are a number of criteria that a presidential campaign team needs to consider in picking that running mate. The first and probably the most important is how many votes do they bring to the kikapu of kura, and along with that, resources for the campaign, assuming the presidential campaign doesn't have unlimited wealth himself or herself. But then there are also the other very important issues that come after an election should that campaign be successful, as we've seen, especially over the last few years between the president and his deputy, how well the two can work together, whether it's a question of Mike Pence and Donald Trump or Kamala Harris and Joe Biden or whatever. And then, God forbid, in the event that the office of president would become vacant, how well that person could perform in running government and representing the interests of the state. So that issue is definitely there, but I'm also very curious to know, I don't know if I could get a chance to interview her, or whether she would confess, and that is, what's the relationship between this decision of hers and the race in Kirinyaga?
Exactly.
I would assume, even if it wasn't announced, that the presidential candidate, the former prime minister, would know what her wishes are.
Yeah.
Whether she's thrown her hat in that very secluded box of potential running mates and basically said to him, well, if you want me, I'm available. Or whether she has said to him, probably with nobody else listening, I will do everything I can to help your campaign for president, but my focus is on Kirinyaga. And there, just to finish, coming back to the survey idea, how would people in Kirinyaga view this? In particular, whatever role, it's one thing to announce. It's another thing, if she does run for governor, how much time and effort is she going to spend in the national arena as opposed to just what's going on in that county? And for that matter, what does Governor Waiguru think about this?
Or Girichi,
right? Yes, we need to interview them also.
Yeah, and I guess that's the interesting thing, you know, about just how much effort she might have been seen to be putting in the Kirinyaga race. I think we've seen Martha Karua cutting a very national figure, you know, lately, being the spokesperson for the Mount Kenya Unity Forum, you know, as Lina said, had talked about. I don't know if you recall the moment when she accompanied other leaders to the second anniversary of the late President Moi's death. And, you know, she cut this national figure and was talking about how, you know, he presented a case of unity. We've seen her quite a bit on the national stage, but perhaps maybe not as much, you know, on the home ground, on the home front.
You remember she was Gishugu Member of Parliament for quite some time before her stab at the governor's seat, which she lost to Anne Waiguru, and she went to
the presidency first.
Yes, and then this now, and she's gone to court. Yeah, to dispute the results of the election of Anne Waiguru, and she lost the election petition. But when you talk about Martha Karua on a national scale, she reminds me of where she was in 2007 when she was firmly with the then President Mwai Kibaki. After the disputed elections, the violence, she was in the team that negotiated with Raila Odinga. Remember, she was firmly in the side of the then president, and then the talks came. And those, I think, who had seen how close she was with President Mwai Kibaki and the fact that she fought in his corner, actually thought maybe she may end up being maybe Deputy Prime Minister or one of those positions that were given after now the handshake and that had the office of the Prime Minister created and all these other offices, and she wasn't. She almost, some would say she was bypassed for that despite all that she did. But then since then, she has really not been much in the home ground, if you ask me, in Kirinyaga. When you speak about Martha Karua, even to me, Kirinyaga comes to the back of my mind, not at the front. Front comes national, na Kenya leader. She's entering into disagreements with leaders of other parties.
Right.
Look at Oka, look at the Mount Kenya one. So she comes across as a national figure. That makes me question whether or not Nyumbani Kirinyaga, really what her chances are compared to those who are on the ground all the time, like the governor, like the women rep Ngirishi, who are there all the time. Because those, they've already declared, Anne Waiguru wants to defend her seat. Ngirishi has declared her interest in the seat. She's even gone independent now after Waiguru joined UDA. They're on the ground, in the trenches all the time. Martha Kat's a more national figure. And I think for her, I think it's a place she needs to be, and I think it's a good place for her.
Yeah.
But if both Ngirishi and Waiguru are basically associated with the deputy president, that splits that vote and gives just a free pass to Martha to take the seat. I mean, it seems to me the electoral arithmetic is very much in her favor.
If she chooses to be in Kirinyaga, and that's the interesting question, isn't it, Linus?
Which for a number of times now she has stated that her interest is in Kirinyaga. I think she has answered that question a couple of times when asked, what is your position? And she says, no, I'm going for governor of Kirinyaga. But of course she comes at a time, and Jamila, you correctly pointed out, the issue of running mate is becoming a question of who will it be in central Kenya? Who shall it be? Because there is that leaning that both the leading candidates, that is Raila Odinga and William Ruto, may pick from politicians in central Kenya, which then takes us to the next thing, which is, Tom, you were asking what would she bring in terms of the vote and all that. Other than the vote, there is something else that may work in her favor, and that is her firmness. She is known to make her mind clear to everyone.
Iron Lady.
She's the Iron Lady in very many ways. She'll make clear where she stands. And you look at that, and there'll be some who would say that is a very good attribute for a deputy president. That is a very good attribute for somebody who will be watching over regional interests. Because our country is about regions, is about voting blocks, tribal blocks, and players are seeing that who will secure your interests, who will fight for your interests out there. And Karua has proven that she is a rather rugged fighter. There's something else that needs to really come out, and it's interesting to see how she'll negotiate that, which is her position on BBI. She's gone to Azimio, which is a coalition resting on the promise of constitutional reforms pushed by BBI, and the bill that is currently a subject of court discussion. So she's against it. She was in
Linda Katiba.
She's in Linda Katiba. Yeah. She's in the opposite side. She doesn't agree with Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga on this question of changing the constitution. So what will this mean? I think for me, the first thing that it will do is they will hear from very close quarters her position on constitutional reforms. She'll be right across the table, and she'll put that position across, not through a press conference, but right there in a table that she can actually bang.
That's interesting. You know, when we talk about the issue of the running mates, I think that's definitely a question that, you know, those on both sides are, you know, specifically focusing on. Tom, won't it be a race of who announces first? And what that does? Will one side be wanting to sort of wait it out and see who will announce, you know, who the other side will pick? That'll be an interesting
one to see. I think I would call it a reverse race in the sense that I've thought about this. I've asked people. I haven't got a firm conclusion. But it seems to me on balance, the presidential candidate who can wait until his main opponent has weka karata yake mezani, and then to see what the landscape is would have an advantage. You can't wait too long because I actually don't know what happens under the Constitution or election law if the clock of midnight strikes on the day that the nominated pair of president and deputy president, that certificate is supposed to be brought from the party or coalition as a party to IEBC. If the presidential candidate is late, does that disqualify him from running? So nobody's going to miss the deadline, but there could be a very interesting drama in the days or even hours to see who goes first. That is, who can wait and make the other one go first. Now, on the other side of the equation, maybe the person who goes first looks bolder and more confident, and it makes the other one trying to catch up. I'm not sure how that's going to work. But just one other point, based on what Linus was saying. I remember leading up to the 2002 election when we had a lot of LDP defectors from Kanu. And there was one day, there was a big rally of the NARC people, or I think NAC as it still was then, in mid-2002, in Suswa, somewhere in Kajiado. And in the evening, I went to watch the news at a certain hotel, and there were a number of these people were sitting at the bar who had been at the rally, including then shortly to be Vice President Kijana Wamalwa, whom I'd gotten to know when I was working at Parliament with USA 10 years earlier, a few years earlier. And I asked him, and maybe this is an unfair kind of biased comment, you could see my politics. I said, Bwana Kijana, how can you just accept all these people from the government you've been fighting as leader of the opposition for so many years without, when they get on the podium and handing them the microphone, at least asking them to maybe apologize or say they were associated with some things they weren't happy about or anything like that? There was no cleansing whatsoever. I don't have to name the names of the people who were there, but being in Kajiado, you can guess who some of them were. And he laughed at me. He said, "We mzungu hujui siasa hapa." Our main requirement is votes. If we don't win by a big enough margin, the other side, having the state machinery, may steal it, so we can't take chances. We will deal with cleansing if and when we take power. But just to bring that to Martha's use of the word comrade, and you also pointing out that she had been a strong opponent of BBI. We don't know if she opposed all the 72 amendments or just the ones that were sort of highlighting. But this really raises the question, even in a political system like this one, where there aren't clear policy, let alone ideological difference between parties, how much does the content, the personal content of the most prominent individuals inside of a campaign, how much of a difference will they make in governance if that person were to win? And as you and Linus, all of you were saying, you can maybe make a list on both sides of where Martha and Raila were together and where they were apart. But I think that will be one of the challenges for you people in media and your colleagues who are doing interviews with these people, and before we get to the debates, is to try to tease that out. So when people get ready to vote, even if people have switched parties and we see, I mean, how many, 178 MPs and senators and women reps I saw in the paper today, with still 48 hours left, have changed parties from what they ran on for the next election and so on and so on. But really to look, what's the, you can think of, I think, both the DP and Raila being at one end of a kind of a teeter-totter, if you know, or seesaw. And you see who's at the other end and what kind of people are going to balance you know, to push him either up or down in a particular policy direction, even in terms of who has responsibilities for the most important dockets within cabinet afterwards. And although everybody is concentrated now on the horse race and how many votes you're going to bring and so on and so forth, I think it's good and it's important to also think what are the implications for these moves and even language, such as Martha was using, in terms of what's the nature of governance, whichever side wins.
I mentioned something that I think we've discussed, the issue of manifestos, because they are going to, in the next few weeks or months, launch their manifestos saying this is what they intend to do. But does it matter? Do manifestos matter at all to voters? Because who reads them? That's the question. They're replicated, we are told. We are told, oh, one was just what the Vision 2030 was slightly changed, and that ended up being a manifesto. Do they really matter? You talk about policy, Tom, but does that matter to the voter?
I'll just give a very short answer. And that is, as we were speaking earlier, in our last survey, we had 30% of the respondents who were asked who they wanted the next president to be. and they wouldn't answer the question. Either they said, sijaamua, or they said, hiyo swali mimi sitaki kujibu, or whatever, or said none of them, or something like that. And yet, most of them expressed an intention to vote. So I think if we're going to, how can I say, wrestle with Jamila's very tough question, we have to try and disaggregate this electorate into those who've already made up their minds for whatever reasons, whether it's ethnic loyalty, whether it's past performance, whether it's because they're tied into a patronage network of rewards, either past or promised and so on, and look at these, especially these undecideds, and see what we can find out about. Now, we asked that question for these people who didn't give an answer. What are you waiting for? And we got all kinds of different answers, including about a quarter of them who wouldn't answer that question either. Maybe because they're confused and they don't know. Maybe they're waiting for their wives or their husbands or their clan leaders or their religious leaders to tell them, and they were shy to admit that. Even maybe some of these 30% actually know who they're voting for, but they were shy. So we did an analysis of some of these other things, which we could talk about maybe on another program, to try to get into their leanings. But certainly, the most specific answer we did get was people wanted to know about their policies, and maybe the manifestos would at least give some indication of that. Yeah, Tom, I know you're about to leave, but I just want to ask one question. So with all of the defections that we're seeing and all of, maybe for lack of a better word, grandstanding. So, you know, when Azimio says we've bagged Martha, and when Kenya Kwanza says we've bagged, you know, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, there is the seeming battle for perception, right, on either side. One is called Kenya Kwanza, another one is called Azimio la Umoja. It's, you know, perception matters? Well, of course it matters, especially for people who are not wedded to a very particular candidate, either because of ethnic loyalty. I was going to say policies, but as Jamila is suggesting, we're not sure what these are. I mean, there's a bottom-up economic model versus a kind of a welfare model. We know what Raila's been associated with in policies in past years. One of your guests on your Daybreak show this morning made the colorful statement, and I'm quoting him directly here, to Trevor Ombija, most politicians here don't believe in anything except what serves their personal interests. Now, I think the more that the difference or the mixture of the main political parties is kind of homogenized with so many defections and so on, and as the deputy president has said, with the leader of the opposition now de facto being part of government, and he being number 2 in government, being de facto opposition leader, I think in a way that confuses people even, well, it makes it even more difficult to be clear about what these people represent in terms of what they would offer in government. But I think in that situation, the perception which seems to matter most, and a beautiful example was Governor Waiguru 6 months ago, and many other people since, like Senator Wamatangi the other day, saying, naweka masikio chini kwa mchanga, halafu nasikia watu wako pande gani. So it's just, you can say it's opportunism. People are trying to go where they think, where the perception is of where the votes are in their particular electoral arena, whether they're confidentially using polls. I remember Governor Waiguru said, I've done my own little poll with Boda Boda. But she actually did a poll, you know, when she asked members of the crowd, where do you think I should go? And, you know, they were shouting UD, and she said, yeah, you know. So in a way, you can criticize and say people are just being opportunistic. But those of us who come from, okay, I've never been in politics, but come from a political family, the basic tenet is politics is the art of the possible, and you don't have much possibility if you don't have power. Absolutely. So let's forgive them for serving their own interests. Leave aside the question of salaries and, you know, emoluments and all the rest of it. But when a politician says, if I'm going to be in office and do anything for my people or myself or some combination of the two, I've got to win. So that's where perception matters. That's where it matters. We want to leave it there for now. We want to take a break. Oh, did you want to chime in?
Just a quick one. Sorry, just a quick one. The perception, to follow up on Tom's point. When you look at all previous elections since 2002, we've got this 5-year ritual of a regional body count, where politicians are really obsessed with ensuring that in one photograph, you'll try and capture all the 8 regions of the country. And you could see, even when Azimio la Umoja was in Jacaranda and KICC, there is that choreographed moment where they'll have to try and hold hands and
the face of Kenya
and do the face of Kenya. They did that in Kasarani as well with UDA because of the perception game, because the communities down in the regions are asking, where are our people? Where is our leader? Which side is it going to be? There's something else that the Martha Karua move resolves. For Azimio la Umoja, there were two pending headaches that were really destabilizing. I'm sure it gave them sleepless nights. One was Kalonzo Musyoka, and the second one was Martha Karua. And strangely, both factors were behaving exactly the same way. You do not know where they stand. You don't know what they want. You don't know what they intend to do next. And the constant fear was always, will Kenya Kwanza, will UDA, will somebody in the Kenya Kwanza alliance be making exactly the same moves as Azimio la Umoja was towards Kalonzo Musyoka and Martha Karua? So they were a headache, especially to the side of Azimio la Umoja. We think now what it does is it settles it. The two biggest dilemmas are out of the way. Kalonzo Musyoka is in the bag, and Martha Karua is in the bag. So the regional
Salia and Wetangula went to the other side.
And Wetangula went to the side. So for Azimio, this was a good week when it comes to what I call the regional body count.
Yeah, interesting. So on that note, we want to take a break, but not before thanking Tom Wolfe, research analyst, for being our guest gangster tonight. There was something that he alluded to and that you should actually tune in for. You can see a little bit more of Tom Wolfe on Saturday with Victoria Rubadiri on her Voters Hub segment, and they will be speaking about the undecided.
With two other panelists.
And two other panelists, of course. So, Tom, thank you for coming. All right, we'll let you go to bed now. I hope we didn't keep you past your bedtime. Let's take a break here on Newsgang. We're back, and when we come back, we'll talk about my word, the insults that we saw. I wonder if you've had a chance to watch that video yet, and of course the reactions to it. And one man, one vote, perhaps not. Does President Uhuru Kenyatta's vote count for more than just one? We'll be talking about that, the Uhuru factor, in the election right here on Newsgang when we return. Stay with us.